Chardonnay, my brothers and sisters. Praise Keck for a great 2016. Hi there, I'm Claire, and welcome to my video blog. Well, I've got some more amusing tales about Remainers and people who still haven't quite got over it, and I want to try and draw some psychological interpretations from this, but I'll tell you the stories first. The first one I'll tell you is about how this chap that I mentioned earlier in the year, who was going on about how he was an internationalist when he was in hospital, and I didn't really feel that I could challenge him on it because he was in such pain. I think he was, I don't know, almost hallucinating or something, and I bumped into him the other day, and I hadn't seen him since the Trump victory, and when I saw him a little while before before the election, and he said something about Trump. He said, "Oh, what, that crazy guy?" And I said, "Well, a lot of people don't think he's crazy." And his kind of eyes went glazed. And so anyway, it seems he'd just been round here dropping off a Christmas card for me. Excuse me. And I didn't know that at the time because I bumped into him up in the town, and I just knew that he was just trying to get away as quickly as possible in case any inconvenient topics of political conversation came up, which I've been very disciplined and very restrained about this, because I don't mention the subject unless I'm feeling extremely cheeky, other than when people put it to me, because one of the things I'm most kind of confused about is why it is, well, I suppose I shouldn't be confused about this, it's kind of obvious, but the thing is, of course, people will say things to you absolutely assuming that you must agree with them, because it's the alternative is completely like I had my former friend who was a senior retired academic, who whenever I would say things that she thought were beyond the political pale, she would no. And I had an experience a little bit like this when I went to the carol service. We have a lovely church in Headingley that does a lovely carol service at Christmas, and so I thought it's good to support the kind of cultural energy. And I was very glad to see that it wasn't quite as thin as I remember it. Anyway, it was nice meeting some people I hadn't seen for a while over a mince pie at the end of this service, and it was all very nice, and said hello to a few people. And then there's this elderly couple. I mean, I call them elderly, but they're very, very kind of young in mind. And I sat down at the table munching on a mince pie, and I spoke to this lady, and I hadn't seen her for a while, and I hadn't made a big deal about this on my video channel, but I think it was in April, or it might have been early May, we had a very good thing happened here in Leeds, because the NGT trolleybus system, which had been examined in immense detail at the public inquiry 2 years ago, was rejected. The trolleybus system was rejected by the government in the view of the all the immense detail of evidence of the dreadful business scheme they had. Anyway, the only reason I'm talking about this is because it was a very, very big thing locally, and I was a big supporter of it, and I actually did some video blogs. A very big supporter of the objectors, and so everybody knew that I was, you know, one of the strongest objectors, and I was really involved with the campaign and everything. So that took place back in April or May, that the beginning of May, something like that, when the result that the government had rejected it, and we were all absolutely immensely pleased. It was absolutely great joy and jubilation, and I thought at the time, well, is this an omen for the coming year. So anyway, this lady, who was about late 70s or perhaps 80, and I've known her for a few years, and she's very nice, and I sat down next to her, and she said, "Oh, Claire, you must be so pleased about the, you know, the," so in my mind I'm going now, see, I've forgotten about the trolley bus by now, because there's been so much excitement with the Brexit and Trump and everything. So I go, oh, and I'm thinking in my mind, no, I can't put her down as a Trumpite, really. Oh, she must be referring to Brexit, because by then the trolley bus decision was so completely in the past. You know, they're having an inquiry in the council again, spending more money. Anyway, so I said, oh yes, you must mean Brexit. Yes, I'm so pleased about Brexit. And then her face fell like I had dropped an anvil on her toe. And she went, "Oh, it's a mess. It's a mess. Oh, no, I meant the trolley bus." And I thought, oh no. When I put my foot in it here, and I thought, well, you know, no, I'm not going to, deny my Brexiteerness. So she said, "Oh no, well, I suppose we'd better not talk about Brexit if that's your view." She said, "Oh, at least my son, he voted Brexit as well, so I don't understand it all." So I thought, oh dear, oh well. Anyway, at least she's a very dignified lady, and she didn't make a fuss about it, but obviously you could just see that moment of expression on her face. That told a million words. I mean, it really was astonishing. It was like, oh my God, it's the end of the world, you know. Claire's become a Satanist or something, you know. And then a few moments later, I overheard something that her husband, who's rather older and is a bit of an eccentric gentleman, is a very nice chap. I do like him. I mean, I've liked him ever since I've met him. He's a very interesting person. And somebody else was talking to him, but I didn't catch the conversation. All I heard him say was, "Oh, Trump. The less said about Trump in the house of God, the better." And I thought, yes, well, it's just as well I didn't assume that his wife was saying how pleased I must be about Trump, because I kind of felt that I'd probably be in alien territory with this one. Although I do have to remind myself that Hillary was a very big supporter of, she's a proponent of late stage abortions. Now, I did post somewhere incorrectly that she was in favour of late final term abortions, but I got the impression that she was pretty much flexible, and that basically, as far as she was concerned, if some kind of reason could be found that you know, any reason pretty much, you know, not just threatening the life of the mother, but that you know how these things go. You get your foot in the door and then suddenly it's wide open. So anyway, I don't think Christians really should generally be very keen on Hillary Clinton, although a lot of them seem to be, and I'll come back to this later. So we've had the chap who kind of virtually ran away from me in the street, who I've known for over 30 years, and this lady and her husband, who I've known for 5 or 6 years. And then there's this Christmas card arrived the next day from a friend who does know that I voted to leave. I exchanged some texts with her at the time, and I got the impression she was a little bit taken aback, but anyway, she was a Corbynite, and she lives a long way away now, so we don't, you know, we're not as much in touch as we used to be. And I got a Christmas card from her. I had already sent a Christmas card, and I didn't say anything that might have upset her or triggered her. And the Christmas card I got from her, it said inside, "Let's hope that 2017 is a better year." And I thought, I'm sure she's miswritten that. She should surely have written, "Let's all hope that 2017 is an even better year than 2016, because 2016, praise Keck, has been a fantastic year for nationalist identitarians, I think, and people who want to retain Western civilization." And I do find this just such a strange thing, as I said at the beginning. I find it such a strange thing that people who 5 or more years ago were anti-globalist. Now I remember, well, back in the days when I used to watch BBC News, I remember in the early 2000s, I remember there was a, they used to have the G7 meetings. I suppose they still do. There was a G7 or a G8 meeting, and I think it was in Genoa in northern Italy, and they were all, ensconced behind huge walls in some ancient castle or something. And I remember the BBC commentator saying that the demonstrators, a lot of demonstrators, they were protesting against G7. And what were they complaining about? They were complaining about globalism. It wasn't just capitalism, it was globalism. That's what they were complaining about. And I remember the BBC reporter at the time said there seems to be some kind of unrest and movement against globalism, but it hasn't truly found its form yet. And I think he was actually correct about that, because if all you're going to get is demonstrators outside these G7 meetings, then you've got to have more than that. You've got to have a culture that, obviously in 2002 the internet really wasn't well enough developed, as we've seen in the last 10 years since, with all the development of social media, YouTube and so forth. So globalism has developed over the last 10 or 15 years since I saw that report. It's got completely nightmarish. And then in 2011 I supported what we had an Occupy movement here in Leeds, and I supported that. Now I know that Occupy is tremendously tainted because of the fact that it's caught up with all George Soros funding, and it's all kind of hyped up and everything. But at the time, I think quite a few of the occupiers were quite genuine intent. It's just that they were kind of following a false leader, as it were. But anyway, the one we had in Leeds, it lasted nearly 2 months, and initially it was very much about calling out the globalist corporations who were failing to pay tax. That seems a reasonable enough thing for me, and I still stand by that, because I'm sure they're still not paying all the taxes that they should do in the countries where they should. And the left seemed pretty kind of supportive of this whole Occupy movement, because it was calling out globalism. It did seem that after nearly a decade that the anti-globalist demonstrators who had marched outside Genoa and all the others in the time in between, and against the war and all this, that it was finally coalescing into something. Anyway, that's a story of the occupiers, another story for another time, because there's no doubt in my mind that the Leeds occupation certainly got infiltrated. There was 2 or 3 chaps who seemed to me to have quite possible military intelligence training, because they managed to completely disrupt the camp and divert it away and call a mess and throw away, get people thrown out, and it was awful. It was absolutely awful. But what these people were trying to do, obviously, was to destroy something that had a bit of potential for going somewhere, and obviously it didn't. It kind of all just dissolved, and then we just, oh, what happened next after that? Well, we had the Syrian civil war emerged pretty soon after that, so that's obviously been a really big, major, significant part of the whole development. The Libya war and death of Gaddafi had taken place in the earlier part of that year. Now, okay, so you fast forward to 2016. Now, I had absolutely, really no idea of any of the implications of what we were going to go into this year. I heard about Trump in late 2015, and I thought, this guy looks promising. We'll have to see how that goes. And then, of course, Brexit came along, and that took me by surprise because I really hadn't anticipated it. And I mean, the campaign, I hadn't anticipated that Cameron would actually, you know, do what he said he would and give us a referendum. And it all kind of caught me by surprise, but I definitely got caught up in it and the energy of it. And obviously I did several videos in the run-up to it, and it was really an immense experience, obviously. But the point is, suddenly all these people who had been supporting Occupy, anti-globalist, the whole thing all the way back to the very early 2000s, even to some extent possibly before even the Iraq War, possibly even before 9/11, there had been this anti-globalist sentiment brewing. And yet suddenly we come to Brexit, and Brexit is clearly, in the minds of myself and many others, it's about national sovereignty versus globalist rule from Brussels, which will then go into, you know, big international things. And yet all these people have been supporting anti-globalism and the Occupy movement for all these years. Suddenly we've got to hang on to the EU. I mean, I remember things coming out about the EU with Codex Alimentarius and all the excessive regulations over the last 4 or 5 years, particularly around about 2012, they really ramped it up. And yet, all these people who wanted to be anti-globalist, anti-corporation, suddenly they're all absolutely supporting Remain. We've got to remain. It's like all the people who want to get out, they're fascists, they're racists, they're Nazis. And I just really don't get this, except that it seems to me that there's been some immense psyops going on here, because how do you turn around a very strong left-wing movement to support those things that it was against only a few years ago, that had been against for over a decade, 15 years or something? I mean, it's unbelievable. So I think there's really major trickery going on here and I think this has something to do with why people are so shocked and so surprised about this. I've mentioned about the New Age thing, that it was all supposed to become wonderful. I've mentioned that about the starseed transmissions in my previous video, and I've actually thought about this a little bit more since then, and I think actually I'd go so far as to say that what's really happened is that this singularity, this mass consciousness, this complete reversal of everything that I was talking about, I think actually it wouldn't have happened, it wouldn't have been necessary, it would never have occurred, and would have never got into this if they hadn't put us into this extreme globalist, homogenizing of all cultures, all this stuff, you know, invading us and stuff, which has all kind of come to a peak, and obviously in the last couple of years. If they hadn't tried to do this, then of course we wouldn't have had Trump, we wouldn't have had Brexit. I mean, if we had remained in the common market, the EEC as it used to be, and we'd never had all this stuff that the globalists have been forcing on us. Hillary Clinton forcing the mass migration on us with the destruction of Libya and Syria, which were two great bulwarks against it. I mean, we all know that Gaddafi warned of this. If the globalists hadn't been pushing all of this, the common market, if it had been still the common market, it would have remained. I wouldn't have seen any need to vote against getting out, to vote against the common market, to get out of the common market. If you still retain national sovereignty, if you're not being flooded with mass migration, if you're not having a massive rise in foreign cultures, if you're not being bled dry by the economic demands of the EU, if you're not being dominated by a load of unelected quangos and bureaucrats from in Brussels, then why would all this be necessary? The same in America. Why would Trump have been necessary if they had honest politicians? You wouldn't have. This has been provoked by the people who have been forcing it. It's like, you're a quiet person, you mind your own business, and then your neighbour starts coming round and pestering you and annoying you about things that are of no consequence or that are none of his business, and then you're forced into taking some kind of reaction to it, whatever that might be, for the circumstances. But so we've seen this, and so I'm thinking, in a way, so to go back to that Starseed transmissions where they say there'll be this wonderful moment where there'll be all enlightenment and everything. I think that they were actually none of this would have even come onto the table if they hadn't been pushing this globalist agenda, this internationalist homogenization of all our cultures and all our races. If they hadn't been seeking this from a long way back, the New Age people wouldn't have got onto this. The whole thing is a complete construction, to use a term that the SJWs are keen on, cultural Marxists. This is all been created, and so it's provoked an immune response in the collective psyche of Western civilization, and I just think that nature has really rescued us here, because it's our instincts. As I've heard on Millennial Woe's Hangouts, which I've been listening to. Go and listen to them, and this is what they're all saying is that I would say that probably, I don't think anybody said this one particularly, but I think that the whole the final straw was obviously Merkel last year, and then all the ongoing terrorist events that have happened. I mean, it's just put it all into perspective. And just made it inevitable, because they just trying to force too much on us. And I think we are also in a crucial stage in the development of human civilization, of Western civilization. Obviously the massive growth of the internet over the last generation, we've had it for something like 25 years, 21 years since Windows 95 came out, which was the big, kind of breakthrough. You could have, an easy browser, and it has helped to coalesce the collective mind of those who are using it. And obviously there are different trends within the internet, but you can find those who are in the same mindset as yourself, and it's just such an interesting kind of coalescence of all the different influences and factors which have led to this. So it's kind of strange that all these the leftist anti-globalists have actually gone and supported the thing which is completely against what they should have believed in. But of course the thing is, they are more committed to internationalism than they are to their own views of socialism for the working people, because the Labour Party have obviously completely abandoned the working class of this country and given themselves over to minority interests. The Labour Party is now kind of partly being, heavily taken over by Muslims. We see people like Sadgit Khan, also the minority racial interests of people like Diane Abbott, people who have, quite clearly it's their desire to destroy the country, the culture, the civilization which allowed them in. And I think it is now coalescing, gelling in the mind of the people. And I think there's a kind of there's an interesting way that this happens just before I think this is a collective amygdala trigger. I've got a blog about the amygdala. It's that part of your brain which says, oh shit, the house is on fire, or my mobile phone has just been stolen, or whatever. It's that sudden moment where, oh my god, I've got to do something about this, whatever it might be, a small thing, a big thing. And I think that we hear all about these snowflakes being triggered about silly little things that people said some word or whatever. Now that is that's a misuse of that's the political hijack of the amygdala hijack, when really that kind of survival response should be saved for more important things, like the marginalisation of your own people in your own civilization and within your own country and within your own nation. And I think this is the fantastic thing about nature, is it will beat social programming every time, because the social programming is just like the cortical overlay of the deep instinctual drives that say, we've got to do something about this, and we've got to do something about it now, because if we don't, then it's going to be the end of our people, the end of our civilization. And it's a slow process. We have to go through. Obviously, Trump is no ethno-nationalist. Trump is, whatever people say, whatever people on the left say, Trump is a civic nationalist. And I think that's what America needs at the moment. It's a civic nationalist. But there will be ethno-nationalist trends that take place within this, and you're seeing this in Europe, and it's an inevitable, natural rise, and there's so many wonderful things about the fantastic year of 2016, the way that the media has been discredited, the media, the people who are telling us all these lies. And I really, really look forward to the people who have been so afraid, the people who have been so triggered, the people who, their faces have fallen, because when they see that, it's already beginning to happen. This is a kind of Trump effect in advance, and obviously Trump isn't responsible for the regaining of Aleppo. Obviously that's a mixture of Assad and Putin sorting that out, but I think he will he will ride on this, and he will help cement peace in Syria. And look, we don't have to like Assad. It's none of our business. He was elected. Tough leaders is what Arabs have. It's historical. It's been going on for thousands of years, and then there will be no excuse for these people not to go back to where they came from, because why should these people stay here if their country is at peace? It's nowhere near as bad what Germany suffered in 1945. So when I think a lot of this will go into reverse. I think a lot of this will go into reverse, and it will go into reverse rather more quickly than we might, guess. Obviously, there will be a tremendous amount of kicking and stamping and screaming and tantrums by the leftists, who would really want all these strangers, all these criminals and migrant opportunists to stay here, because it would continue to devalue our civilization and continue to inflict multicultural decay upon our civilization. But I really do look forward to a kind of almost, almost like a restoration of nature. And it's, there will be resistance to it, but I think there is going to be something spontaneous about this, because 2016 has been, this spontaneous, the spark. I think the spark was last September a year ago, when Merkel opened the doors. And I remember at the end of last year, I remember Henrik Palmgren of Red Ice Radio saying something to the effect of good riddance to the wretched year of 2015. 2015 was a wretched year. It was the nadir. But it's so often the case that just before something completely ends, the new thing will arrive. And in 2015, we had David Cameron promising us a Brexit vote. And in 2015, around about the same time, shortly after Cameron was re-elected, Trump announced his candidature, that he was standing. And these two little seeds were already there before Merkel, wrote the suicide note of Europe. And so while this time a year ago it might have seemed so far off, and people were kind of saying, oh, that stupid Trump and everything, and I didn't even know who Trump was before he announced his candidature. I'd heard the name, people made jokes about him, I didn't know, I had no idea. I got him mixed up with other people who had nothing to do with him, it's just completely off my radar. And yet, everything that's happened since then has supported the rise of these new influences, and Italy, of course, recently has just rejected the constitutional reform which would cement it more solidly in the EU, and there's already talk of a return to the lira and return to the franc in France, and unfortunately Hofer lost in Austria, but that's probably the least big deal. And I think we might still wonder whether it was rigged, just like the first election. They just rigged it more effectively the second time. I think that the people whose faces fall when they hear that you've been a Brexiteer, or even worse, that you support Trump, God, I think they will either have to realise that it's actually improving, and they'll say, oh well, that's okay, that's cool, or else they'll carry on in this kind of mind controlled kind of way, and you know, even when I think we can be fairly confident that the American economy will improve. There's all sorts of signs already. Companies are talking about deals. People are talking about remaining, and when they were going to go and you know, relocate down in Mexico and all this stuff. So the economic indications are already looking pretty good, and the same with Britain. You know, if we could just get out of this bloody this is the mess that I think Brexit is these people trying to stop us, people trying to get in the way. But I think that Trump will discreetly from the sidelines assist us, because the European magnates, the Junckers and the Tusks, they will have to accept that the most powerful office in the world is now, you know, taken by somebody who has different policies from them, and is not going to go along with them. So it's just wonderful to see the propaganda and the mind games unravelling. And I think the people who were, you know, in the past supporting ideas like Occupy will realise that this is the manifestation of that trend that has been going for so long. It's just that the cultural Marxist and super left internationalist communist type media has misled them into, because you know, if the kind of consciousness that was behind the Occupy movement 5 years ago had also been added to Brexit and to Trump, it would have been overwhelming. It was, you know, it was enough to win, but we wouldn't have minded winning more strongly. But of course it was because of the lies and just endless lies that were told about us. You know, the Brexit, they're saying we're, you know, I've heard people since, we are apparently, you know, individually responsible for the murder of Joe Cox. And I mean, obviously there's a whole lot of very dubious stuff about that I won't go into right now. And the same thing about everything. You know, one minute they're saying, oh, you know, Trump's awful because he won't accept the result of the election, and then Clinton doesn't accept the result of the election when, you know, Jill Stein gives her the opportunity to get into recounts and everything. So everything these people do, I do kind of think there's something metaphysical about this, because it's almost like everything they do rebounds against them and reinforces their enemy, you know, our causes. It's quite astonishing, and this is so much more than just a political campaign. This is what I think of as a Jungian. This is like a Jungian event. It didn't need to happen, but since they forced all this stuff on us, this is the natural rebound of the universe, of nature, of instincts, of our people. And I think they will find that once we've got past the mess of people trying to resist Brexit, that 2017 will be an even better year. So a very merry Yuletide to everybody, and a happy Christmas, and praise Keck for 2016, and may 2017 be an even better year. Thank you very much. Please share and like, and go and check out my book. Okay, thanks a lot, folks. Bye. Happy New Year. That crazy guy. And I said, well, a lot of people don't think he's crazy. And his kind of eyes went glazed. And so anyway, it seems he'd just been round here dropping off a Christmas card for me. Excuse me. And I didn't know that at the time, because I bumped into him up in the town. And I just knew that he was just trying to get away as quickly as possible in case any inconvenient topics of political conversation came up, which I've been very disciplined and very restrained about this because I don't mention the subject unless I'm feeling extremely cheeky, other than when people put it to me. Because one of the things I'm most kind of confused about is why it is, well, I suppose I shouldn't be confused about this, it's kind of obvious, but the thing is, of course, people will say things to you absolutely assuming that you must agree with them, because it's the alternative is completely like I had my former friend who was a senior retired academic, who whenever I would say things that she thought were beyond the political pale, she would no. And I had an experience a little bit like this when I went to the carol service. We have a lovely church in Headingley that does a lovely carol service at Christmas, and so I thought it's good to support the kind of cultural energy, and I was very glad to see that it wasn't quite as thin as I remember it, and anyway, it was nice meeting some people I hadn't seen for a while over a mince pie at the end of this service, and it was all very nice, and said hello to a few people. And then there's this elderly couple. I mean, I call them elderly, but they're very, very kind of young in mind. And I sat down at the table munching on a mince pie, and I spoke to this lady, and I hadn't seen her for a while, and I hadn't made a big deal about this on my video channel, but I think it was in April, or it might have been early May. Chardonnay, my brothers and sisters, praise Keck for a great 2016. Hi there, I'm Claire, and welcome to my video blog. Well, I've got some more amusing tales about Remainers and people who still haven't quite got over it, and I want to try and draw some psychological interpretations from this, but I'll tell you the stories first. The first one I'll tell you is about how this chap that I mentioned earlier in the year, who was going on about how he was an internationalist when he was in hospital, and I didn't really feel that I could challenge him on it because he was in such pain. I think he was, I don't know, almost hallucinating or something, and I bumped into him the other day, and I hadn't seen him since the Trump victory, and when I saw him a little while before before the election, and he said something about Trump. He said, "Oh, what? We had a very good thing happened here in Leeds, because the NGT trolleybus system, which had been examined in immense detail at the public inquiry 2 years ago, was rejected. The trolleybus system was rejected by the government in the view of the all the immense detail of evidence of the dreadful business scheme they had. Anyway, the only reason I'm talking about this is because it was a very, very big thing locally, and I was a big supporter of it, and I actually did some video blogs. A very big supporter of the objectors, and so everybody knew that I was, you know, one of the strongest objectors, and I was really involved with the campaign and everything. So that took place back in April or May, that the beginning of May, something like that, when the result that the government had rejected it, and we were all absolutely immensely pleased. It was absolutely great joy and jubilation, and I thought at the time, well, is this an omen for the coming year? So anyway, this lady, who's about late 70s or perhaps 80, and I've known her for a few years, and she's very nice, and I sat down next to her, and she said, "Oh, Claire, you must be so pleased about the, you know, the," so in my mind I'm going now, See, I've forgotten about the trolley bus by now because there's been so much excitement with the Brexit and Trump and everything. So I go, oh, and I'm thinking in my mind, no, I can't put her down as a Trumpite, really. Oh, she must be referring to Brexit, because by then the trolley bus decision was so completely in the past. You know, they're having an inquiry in the council again, spending more money. Anyway, so I said, oh yes, you must mean Brexit. Yes, I'm so pleased about Brexit. And then her face fell like I had dropped an anvil on her toe.